Hi, I'm Kathleen. I'm the one who is applying for the publishing manager position. So let's get started. I'm just going to start and tell you a little bit about myself. As you probably gathered from reading my resume, I graduated in 2008 from OSU with a bachelor's in English. I later went on to get my master's, also in English. But in the meantime, I started working at Tate Publishing. I started as a copy editor and became a developmental editor, a project manager, eventually a senior editor that worked with a team of developmental editors that I managed remotely. And I was also the director of special projects at that time as well. So that was the bulk of my experience at Tate. Since then, I've worked in marketing writing, and I've done some freelance journalism for some local publications. I've done professional blog writing, and of course, freelance editing, mostly developmental stuff. So needless to say, I think that I have some experience that would be very valuable for this position. So I'm just going to start and talk a little bit about my communication style. My biggest thing is that clear, open, honest communication is the most important thing. I think if you do that, then your authors will always feel like they can trust you, which is really important when you're working on a project of theirs that has probably been really important to them for a really long time. So my kind of motto is clear communication, always be open, and be as honest as possible at all times. I always communicate both by phone and by email. Obviously, I prefer email because having a written record of what you've talked about lets you go back and see patterns and ensure that you're always on the same page. If I do a phone call, I always send a follow-up email to make sure that we are on the same page about things, they know what we talked about, and we have a clear plan of what we're going to do going forward. And I think that's really important for our clients, and I think that's really important for us, not just from a standpoint of I can go back and say, hey, I did say this, but also it lets the author know that you're taking it seriously and you want them to be really involved, which is an important thing for them. I think a big part of communication is listening. I am a very empathetic person, and I think that that's a huge part of working with other people and keeping people happy. There are bound to be things that go wrong. There are bound to be miscommunications, even with email and phone calls. And part of dealing with that, I think, is listening to how they feel, acknowledging their feelings, and empathizing with what they're going through. I've done that a lot with authors that I've worked with. A lot of them wrote memoirs and biographies, things that were really personal to them. And if they don't feel that it's going right, it can be really frustrating and really emotional. So for me, listening to what they had to say, listening to them get their feelings out, and empathizing with how they were feeling about the situation, whether they were just frustrated with the length of time it took to make a book, or if they were frustrated because the edits weren't going the way they wanted to, or if they were just having a hard time dealing with the situation that they were writing about. Knowing that I understood where they were coming from and that I'm on their side, that's really important. So I think empathy is really key to good communication because, again, in order for them to trust you with this project that's probably really near and dear to their heart, they have to know that it's in good hands and that you understand their goals for it. So that's really important to me. Also, honesty. Again, things are not always going to go perfectly according to plan, and if there's a problem, I think that it is imperative that you be honest with the person as much as you can about what's happening and what's being done to get taken care of. It's more than just customer service. It's letting them know that their project is still going to happen, that this is not a permanent setback, and it also puts you in a situation where you're both solving a problem together. It's not the client coming to you with a problem and you saying, you just sit tight and I'm not going to tell you anything, but you'll take care of it. You're working together, you're talking together, they know what's happening, and you can work together to solve a problem. And I think that that eliminates some of potential animosity that can happen when people feel like they're not being heard or feel like everything's going wrong, and it can be overwhelming. So just keeping them updated, letting them know exactly what's being done to address things, I think that's really important. And the last thing is teamwork. Obviously, teamwork is important between people working on the project on the book side, but also with the authors, I've always made a real point to make them feel not like I'm their editor and they need to just let me do my job and leave me alone. We're working together on this project to make it the best that it can possibly be. And I've had really good results with that. Authors, especially of fiction, who sometimes get really attached to the words that they have on the page. They have this story in them, but sometimes the mechanics of the story are not perfect and we have to work on it. But when I've come at it from an approach of, here are my opinions, here is what I see, let's find something together that we can both do that will make this book as perfect as it can possibly be. And I think that approaching things that way has made authors not only more open to suggestions, but also a lot more comfortable making changes in something that's really emotionally important to them again. So I guess the bottom line is that I communicate with authors exactly like I communicate with everyone in my life, and I try to treat them like a friend, like a human being, someone who we're in it together. It's not an adversarial relationship, and that has resulted in me having very few conflicts with authors that I've worked with, which is great because a happy working relationship makes a book come out better, and that's the ultimate goal. So that's a little bit about my communication style. As far as my organization, I am meticulously organized with documents and stuff on my computer. I have kind of a folder system. So I'm used to working on kind of a monthly schedule as far as edits go. So, and this was the case when I worked at Tate also. When I was a project manager, books were scheduled on a monthly basis. So my plan has always been, I have a folder on my desktop that has the year. Inside that folder is a folder for every month. And inside the month is a folder with the author's last name of every book that starts that month. So I was working on probably about 30 projects at a time, starting about 6 to 10 new books a month. When I was at Tate. Since I've been freelancing, I have cut that number down pretty significantly, so I'm not getting that many new projects every month. But that was the case then as a project manager. So like if it was January, inside January, there's, Smith, Jones, Pearson, all of the authors have their own folders within that folder. And then within those folders, there's a folder for Word documents, there's a folder for design elements, there's a folder for illustrations if the book has illustrations, so that all the elements of the book are kept organized in their own categories. And then for the actual documents, I have a really meticulous file naming system. So different versions of the manuscript, like if it's the very first rough draft, then it's first edit _ author's last name _ month. So that way there's always a clear progression where you never have to wonder where something got hidden. You always know exactly where you're saving something, and you can see the delineation as different drafts of a manuscript are made. If there are different versions of the same draft, like if I make certain changes to the first edit, then the author makes a few more changes to the first edit and sends me a new file, that becomes first edit _ last name _ month, and then brackets 2. So it's the second version of that same draft. So that's my naming system. It's worked out really well. I've never lost anything important. I know where everything is, and I always back everything up. Right now I'm backing up to Google Drive, but I also have done Dropbox in the past, backing it up to the cloud so that if I'm not at my desktop computer, no matter where I am, I can access the files, I know right where they are, and it's always completely updated. And of course, redundancy is really important to me in everything I do. I like to have multiple versions so that if something does happen, if my computer crashes, then I know that everything is safe somewhere. And that goes for my scheduling as well. I have multiple calendars. Of course, I keep a digital Google Calendar that's on my computer and my phone, but I also have a day planner. I have 2, actually. I have one that's just for work projects, and I have one that's for my personal life. So I keep multiple calendars, which really it just helps me feel better. I always know what's happening, what day, what my time frame is like. I actually have my Google Calendar send me an itinerary at the beginning of every day so that I know exactly what my schedule is going to be for the day. And I always have a to-do list going. So my big thing is that every morning when I sit down at my desk, I want to have a clear list of things that have to get done that day. It lets me prioritize better, which helps with time management and makes me more efficient, which is how I was able to, for all those years at Tate, work on so many projects with so many people and never get confused and not forget anything, because I'm just so meticulous about making sure I know what needs to be done and when. So I also, this kind of goes back to the communication issue, but I found it really effective to kind of have office hours, times when I make sure that all my authors or clients know that I'm going to be available by phone. So they can email me anytime. I always get back to them within 24 hours. When you're working with up to 30, 35 people at a time, sometimes you can't answer an email right in the moment. And I tried to stop doing that anyway because it just turned into never getting anything done because I was constantly stopping to answer emails. So I kind of set up office hours. I said, these are the hours I'm available by phone. And then I had set hours for myself that were just for answering emails, usually first thing in the morning, because that to me is a good way to jumpstart the day. But I found that was effective for my authors. They always knew exactly when they could reach me, and I was able to do my editing work uninterrupted for a certain period of time during the day also, which again helps with prioritizing tasks and helps with productivity. And I think that as long as you're upfront in that communication with your authors, I never had a problem with it. Obviously, that doesn't have to be the way it is, but I found that setting up those light boundaries kind of helped all of us stay on track and organized and helped streamline communication a little bit more. So that's part communication, part organization, but that's kind of how I've done things, and it's been pretty successful for me. So, which brings us to the big question, why I'm the person that you should hire for the job. Obviously, I'm friendly, I'm outgoing, I enjoy people, I enjoy meeting people and talking to them, and I want their projects to succeed, which I think is something that people can tell when they're talking to you on the phone. On a more practical level, I'm accustomed to working on multiple projects at a time and overseeing their production. When I was working as a project manager and senior editor, I had a team of developmental editors who were doing the actual editing work. So what I was doing was basically being the liaison between the editors and the author, communicating on their behalf and making sure that I was kind of doing a quality control check with the edits to make sure that they were what the author was looking to do and that they would be easy for the author to understand. So just getting another set of eyes on our end of things, but also being the person who was there to kind of put out fires, help the authors solve problems, and kind of hold their hand through the process. So I'm very familiar with working in that sort of role. I'm a natural leader. I worked on, especially as director of special projects at Tate, I worked on a lot of improvement projects, interdepartmental seminars. I streamlined a lot of communication documents between authors, like contracts, approval forms, that kind of thing, so that it was easier for authors to understand and easier for us to keep control of, so that communication wasn't just everywhere. I also worked with a team to implement a company-wide telecommuting program at Tate, which was awesome and also made me really comfortable working with a team remotely. Even when I was a developmental editor, I worked from home several days a week and never had any problems with communication with either my coworkers or with authors. So I'm very comfortable working remotely. In fact, a lot of times I prefer it. And the bottom line is I just really love making books. I love publishing, and I want people's projects to succeed. I have a real passion for the industry, and I think that that's something that rubs off on other people. I think that's something that makes a positive impact. So I think I could fit into this role flawlessly. It's something that I have experience in, but also it seems like in this position I'd be able to expand my reach a little bit, work with different types of books and different types of authors, and that is something that not only lets me do the work that I love, but nurtures my creativity and lets me expand on my skills as well. So yeah, I think that I'd be a great fit for the position, and I hope that you will too. So you have my contact information, so feel free to get a hold of me anytime, and I will speak to you soon. Thank you.